Hi, everyone. My name is Christine. I am the Communications Coordinator Contractor with the South Dakota Specialty Producers. I want to thank you all for joining us on our Climate Smart Architecture chat with Jeffery Vander Wilt. Thanks for being here, Jeffrey. This segment is funded in partnership with Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS, and the South Dakota Specialty Producers to promote sustainable agriculture practices and environmental stewardship. I don't know if we could have found a better person, but Jeffrey here has quite the resume with NRCS. So Jeffrey, please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
You bet. Good morning. I'm Jeff Vander Wilt. I'm the Assistant State Conservationist for programs. I work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is part of USDA. I'm based out of our state office in Huron, South Dakota. And my job really is to provide leadership and guidance to the state of South Dakota on the implementation of the different programs in the Farm Bill. And so basically the programs that I oversee are the Agriculture Conservation Easement Program, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, the Conservation Stewardship Program, and our Water Bank Program. So those are kind of the main four programs that I work with, and my staff help deliver out to the different field offices here in South Dakota, and that ultimately hopefully go help producers in South Dakota.
So you're a busy guy.
I am a busy guy. I do quite a bit of traveling, trying to cover the whole state, try to get out and meet with as many partners and do talks or things like this with as many partners to get the word out so that producers understand that we have a lot of capacity to try to help them on their operations, whether it's a small operation or a really large operation, doesn't matter. We're just here to help producers in South Dakota protect and use their natural resources wisely.
I appreciate that work. And the more producers I talk to, the more I hear how they've actually, oh yes, we've got this through NRCS, or they help fund this well, or this kind of thing. And so, you know, you manage 4 different sectors, but there are a lot of in between sort of practices. Like we have EQIP, we have Climate Smart. Can you just kind of outline how they all flow? And I'm assuming they're pretty interchangeable sometimes.
Yeah, they're very interchangeable, and you can actually participate in more than one at a time. So there's no kind of limitations that way. But really kind of how this all works, we'll start with our Environmental Quality Incentives Program. That program is meant to help producers really get some infrastructure and maybe a little bit of management on their operation. Like you said, we've done a lot of wells, pipelines, tanks. We do a lot of cover crops, cross fencing, those kinds of practices through EQIP. Now, you don't have to do it in this order, but if I were to give you the perfect order, this would be the perfect order. You do some EQIP with us, and after doing that, your operation would really probably be ready for the Conservation Stewardship Program. That program is really designed at helping producers improve or just do a better job of managing the resources on their operation and providing some cost incentive or cost share incentive to help them do that. And then the last 2 are kind of more of a long-term type program. The Water Bank Program helps landowners that have wetlands that have become flooded and have grown bigger than they naturally occur, and provides them a 10-year rental payment on that land, just to help offset the fact that those lands have been flooded. And then if you're really looking for long-term protection, that's where our easement program comes in. And our easement program is actually broken into 2 sections. We do wetland conservation easements, and then we do agricultural land conservation easements. The wetlands are just like it sounds. We're looking to restore and protect some wetlands, and we can do that for 30 years or in perpetuity. And then if you want to protect your ag land, whether it's crop, pasture, range, doesn't matter, we can do an easement on that as well, and that is in perpetuity as well. And while that's very high cut, there's a lot more detail to it, what those programs will actually do for a producer. And then to kind of tie it all together, with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, we now have a bunch more money to do climate smart practices through EQIP, CSP, and ACEP. So actually all three of them will do climate smart activities through the Inflation Reduction Act. So that brings more money. It does bring a few more restrictions on what we can do because it has to be climate smart activities. But yeah, you can still stop in our office and our folks will definitely help you work on a conservation plan and get you the real nitty gritty details of how those programs would fit into your operation.
That is quite the flow chart there in my head. I'm writing down some notes, but for anybody listening, our audience, I have put Jeff's contact information in our description. So if you're wondering where is my local NRCS office, who can I get in touch with? You can send him an email, give him a quick call. You know, working with NRCS employees has been, I've never met a group of people who are like, yeah, we want to help. Yeah, we've got some money. Like, what's your idea? So if you're a producer who's falling into any of these kind of issues, if you've got wetland you need help with, if you've got you know, grants or any loans that you are looking to pursue, I highly recommend reaching out to an NRCS office. So is there I know it's going to be kind of vague because climate smart, like you said, it falls under several different categories. But with some grants and loans that I've asked people about in the past, is there like a certain amount that has to be provided from the producer, or does it kind of depend on the situation?
So the way that so for EQIP and CSP, and that's probably the main programs that we'll talk about today. Easements is a whole different ball game. But with EQIP and CSP, basically what we provide is cost share, or we provide an incentive. And we have a payment schedule for each one of our practices. Typically what happens, just to use some very basic numbers, if we were going to install a practice and it costs $100, typically NRCS would come in and pay somewhere between $50 and $75. And then the other $50 to $25, $25 to $50 would be at the producer's cost. So we don't pay 100% typically, but what we do is those prices are laid out for you right ahead of time, so you know exactly how much we are going to pay, that you don't have to guess. So if you're going to install a foot of pipeline, we have the price laid out of what we will pay for a foot of pipeline. And then when you go to talk to your contractor about it, you know what NRCS is going to pay per foot. And if the producer or the contractor tells you they're going to charge you $3, you can subtract off what NRCS is going to pay, and then you know what your costs are. So we've taken, it used to be we would just pay a percentage, and so there was a little bit of a guessing game. Now it's clear and right out there so that everybody knows that this is what NRCS is going to pay.
That's got to be helpful, I'm sure.
You know, I think it did help quite a bit in just taking a lot of the guesswork out of, because I've worked for NRCS for 26 years, so I go way back to when we did the percentage stuff, and there were some producers that would get upset because they thought, we were going to pay X, and when it came right down to it, we didn't get anywhere close to that, and a lot more came out of their pocket. So this kind of took that issue away and just said, here's what we are going to pay. And so you can go talk to a contractor, you can get that figured out ahead of time and not have to have a whole lot of guesswork.
Yeah, that would be frustrating on both ends, right? You're trying to help this producer and you feel like you can get them across the finish line, but then it's that red tape. So it's nice to have a clear outline. I kind of want to talk about your NRCS history, if you don't mind. Sure. Where did you start, and can you kind of give us your trail of how you ended up to be the go-to person?
You bet. So I've spent my entire career, all 26 years in South Dakota, I started out as a range conservationist. So I graduated from South Dakota State with a range degree, got on with NRCS as a student, and worked out in Walls, South Dakota as a student, and also in Clear Lake, South Dakota as a student. And after graduation, then I became a range conservationist in winter. Did that for several years, and then I became a district Then I moved to Aberdeen, South Dakota as a range conservationist there as well. And then to Gettysburg as a district conservationist in Gettysburg. And then on to Huron, I became our state business tools coordinator. I did that for about 5 years, and now I've been the assistant for programs for the last 13 years. And basically in this last 13 years, working in the programs division of NRCS is kind of where a lot of this climate smart stuff started. Hopefully a lot of your folks have heard, we made a big push 8-9 years ago, probably, maybe a little bit more than that. We started making a real big push on soil health. And one of the big things about soil health is we wanted to get some of the carbon back into the soil, because by getting carbon back into the soil, I'll say this too, whether you're a big believer in climate change or not, doesn't really matter to me, because in the end, getting carbon back into the soil is the most productive and healthy thing you can do for your soils, because it'll reduce your input costs. It'll help water infiltrate more. You won't have as much erosion. You'll have more moisture there for your plants and your crops to grow. And so just overall, climate smart or not, getting carbon back in the soil is the right thing for us to do, just as people that care about the land. So I've spent the last 10 years, learning about getting carbon back into the soil.
I am not a producer. I don't think that's a shock to many of our viewers, but a really great documentary that helped me fully understand how to, taking away the politics of climate change, but to actually understand why the Dust Bowl happened, why there was the Great Depression. It's this amazing documentary that actually works with NRCS employees out of Kansas City, and it's called Kiss the Ground.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Yeah. So I highly recommend that for anybody who is really interested in soil health, which we all should be. I mean, it's our livelihood, it's our food, it's our whole system. And so we've literally got, evidence of what happens when we don't cultivate that soil and take care of it and add that carbon back into it. And it's really something that just kind of stops you in your tracks. So in your 26 years, I mean, this Climate Smart Act, these practices are not new to you, right?
Been doing them my entire career.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing about NRCS. People will say, come up with new catchphrases and kind of new things to target on, like climate smart or even soil health. NRCS has basically been doing the same thing for probably over 80 years now, since we were first formed as an agency. And that is just helping producers stop erosion, keep their nutrients on their land, and just, create productive, healthy soil. So it is nothing new. It's the same thing, just a different spin on it, because, that's what politicians like to do when they pass new bills, is put new spins on things. So
I'm in marketing, and sometimes I say that marketing is our biggest hindrance, because you can spin anything into a new idea, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's better, right?
Correct. Yep.
So you are the person to talk about what is the difference between Climate Smart and EQIP.
So the only difference really is that with Climate Smart, we have taken a subset of our practices. We have a long list of practices. I think we have 120 some practices in our repertoire. What we did was we looked at that entire list of practices, and we said, which one of those practices can we document? One of two things. Can we document that we're putting carbon back in the soil, or that we're preventing any kind of greenhouse gas emissions? So those were the two things that we were looking for when we were looking at our Climate Smart list. And so we've developed a list, and I should share that with you. Let me pull it up here and share it. See if I can make this happen. Hopefully. So are you able to see that?
Yep, that works perfect.
Awesome. So this is our list of climate smart practices. And so what you'll see, and I'll explain this a little bit, and you can look this up online. This is something you could Google. So we have our practice code and our practice name. These are the practice code and practice names are practices that we can do through EQIP. And then behind that, you'll see our CSP codes, the Conservation Stewardship Program. So these are the list of practices where we can document how much carbon we're putting back into the soil, or how much greenhouse gas are we preventing from escaping to the atmosphere. And so there's a list, and I couldn't even tell you, it's 4 pages worth of stuff here. We've got them broken out into categories. You see soil health here on the side. That's one of the categories. We got nitrogen management. We've got livestock, grazing and pasture land practices. And then here at the end, we've got some agroforestry and wildlife practices. So, you know, we try to, I think basically, no matter what it is you're producing here in South Dakota, or whatever your goals are for your operation, there are at least some practices on here that you're going to find would benefit your operation.
I mean, 4 pages worth, that's
Correct.
so many. And for those wondering, if you go to the NRCS website and search kind of what you're looking for, it's a lot easier to navigate. They have so many resources, but we'll also put a link in the comments to this PDF for you to download as well. I myself have tried to just memorize a few EQIP practices, and I cannot do it. So these PDFs and resources, you know, they're up to date and they're helpful. They also give you a good idea of what range, you know, you could get help with. So Jeff, what's kind of, you know, a pretty typical process that you work with a producer? Does it entail having, you know, to go survey land, and what kind of requirements?
You bet. So typically how this works is a producer comes into our office and says, and this isn't what they say, but this is what we hear at NRCS is, I have a resource concern on my operation. You know, the producer is probably going to walk in and say, hey, I don't have enough water for my livestock, or I think I've got a gully erosion situation going on my land I'd like to treat. You know, they're going to come in and talk something a little more specific. But what we hear is, I've got a resource concern I need your help with. And what our folks will do is typically they'll go out to the site with the producer and they'll talk about what's going on, what's causing the erosion, or where or how would we get water to your livestock. Things like that. Or maybe you don't have enough wildlife habitat and you want more wildlife habitat. They'll talk about things like that. And what they're doing is they're formulating with you as a producer, they're formulating a conservation plan, right? This is what we want to do. Here's what the producer's goals are. Here's how NRCS is going to help them get to those goals. And that's what our conservation plan basically is. Once that conservation plan is in place, or we've got an idea of what we want to accomplish out there, then we start talking about which program fits the best, right? Because I've talked about 4 programs that NRCS administers. There's actually a 5th program that the Farm Service Agency, which is our sister agency, Farm Service Agency has a CRP program. So we might also talk about options with CRP with that producer, to trying to find the best ways to meet those goals that the producer and NRCS had talked about. Once they've got that figured out, then it's all about applying for that program, meeting eligibility, which is almost always very simple. And then there's a ranking process. So let me talk about eligibility just a little bit. To be eligible for our programs, you've got to be an ag producer. And our definition of ag producer is somebody that produces $1,000 worth of agricultural products. Beyond that, we have what we call our HEL and wetland provisions, basically just saying that you're not draining wetlands. And if you are farming highly erodible land, that you have a highly erodible plan in place to prevent erosion. And then there's an AGI. The producer has to have an AGI of less than $900,000. Okay. There's no land size requirements. Like with our high tunnels, we basically put high tunnels on a garden, you know, just a backyard garden, doesn't have to be very big. All the way up to we work with guys that, you know, probably are farming or ranching 30, 40,000 acres. So we work with, you know, kind of everybody in between. So from a small garden all the way up to, you know, 50,000 acre kind of an operation. So those are the biggest things. The wetlands and the highly erodible land, the AGI, and then the ability to produce $1,000 worth of product. That's basically what it takes to be eligible for our programs. And then once you're eligible, we'll work with you on the application. So
I'll reiterate, NRCS wants to help producers as much as they can. But I don't want our audience to think this is really super easy to do. I mean, there comes codes with cities and you know what's actually gonna be effective on your property. So having the experts come out and survey and make a plan for you, that's a really nice service to have. But is there a certain time period? I know that we're still talking about 4 to maybe 5 different processes here, but is there usually a time limit on the funds, or can they continue throughout the years?
Yep. So we are a federal agency. So our fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th. And most of you, I think, are aware Congress has to pass a budget. That budget has to be passed for us to operate. So we get funds every October, assuming Congress does their job. And then we have until September 30th to obligate those funds. And I want to be very clear on that. We just need to obligate them. And by obligating them, we mean we're tying them into a contract with the producer. It doesn't mean that the producer has to have all the work done by September 30th. We just have to have the contract in place, and then the producer can go do the work. So our funds do expire at the end of September. We do what we call a batching period or an announcement we put out to ask folks to get their applications in by a certain date. Typically that date is sometime in November, maybe December. But with that being said, I talked about that conservation plan that we really like to put together with you. You can come in, you can apply anytime, and we'll work on that conservation plan, and we'll get you ready by that application deadline. That application deadline just means that at that point in time, we're taking all the applications that we have on file, and we're going to go through a ranking process. And the reason we need to do the ranking process is we have way more producers looking for our assistance than we have funding for. So we go through a ranking process to help determine where those funds are, who's going to receive those funds through a contract. So it is a little bit complicated, and it does take a little time. So my biggest probably message would be come in early, let's work, let's talk about different things, and let's get you on the right path, because it's going to take a little time. It's not like going to Walmart where you can just walk in and say, hey, I want a pipeline and tank, and boom, you get a pipeline and tank. We've got to jump through our hoops because we're the government, and we got to go through the ranking to make sure that we're getting the dollars out to where they need to go. So it does take a little time. So come in early.
Patience. I was going to say, are there certain things that producers can do on their side to help make the process go faster at all?
Probably not a whole lot. But here's the thing. If you wait till close to the batching date or the application deadline, it gets to be harder for us to service everybody. And so it's easier if folks just come in when they're thinking of an issue that they're having, come in, talk to us, get the ball rolling. Time is the biggest factor. The more time we have to spend with you as a producer, talking about options and alternatives, getting that plan laid out, getting that estimate put together of what things are going to cost, so that the producer is, we don't want the producer to overcommit themselves either, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing the practices they want to do, that they can afford to do, and they can have a little time then to look at that plan, talk to contractors or their agronomists or whomever they need to talk to, so that they know that budgetarily that, oh, this should all work for me. NRCS is going to have this amount of funding for me, and that, that gets that project just rolling on the ground and going smooth right away.
And for producers listening who are like, all right, I'm ready, would you direct them to the NRCS website to apply first? Would you direct them to an NRC office?
I really recommend going into the office and visiting with our staff. There's a lot of, the application tells us a few things about what the producer wants to do, but really having that conversation, whether they call in or stop in the office, just getting that conversation started, so that we start formulating an idea of what that producer's goals are, so we can talk the right programs and the right practices, and just kind of be prepared to help them get that conservation plan put together.
Is there any sort of item that can't be approved? Like, could a producer apply to pay wages, or is there certain, when purchasing land or something, is there taxes to worry about? Are there big things that you just can't accept or can't help people with?
Yes. Yeah. We don't pay wages directly. What we're doing, we're a land conservation agency. So what we do is help you do things on the land. We don't help put up machine sheds. We don't help buy machinery. We don't help buy land either. But what we do is provide you what we call technical assistance, which is basically, a little bit of what I would like to say, a little experience or a little bit of technical knowledge about how the soils work, how plants grow, how nutrients act in the soil, to allow you to use your dollar that you are buying for input costs or seeds or any of those kinds of things, how to help you use them wisely, and not overspend on putting too much fertilizer down, as an example, or not losing a bunch of your land to erosion because it's just washing down the creek, taking not only the soil with it, but all the nutrients that you put down with it as well. So all that money basically now is, washing downstream. So our job really is to help you with your land and manage your land wisely and productively. We're all about agriculture. We're all about wildlife and helping you create wildlife habitat or productive agricultural practices. So we don't do anything really in the way of purchasing land or machinery or anything capital in that regard. So now that's not to say that, if you hire an agronomist or an agronomy company to come out and put nutrients on your, we'll help pay for that service. So when you say wages, it gets a little tricky because people might think the wrong idea. We'll help pay for a service, or we'll pay a producer to apply nutrients in a certain way because it's different. Really kind of what we pay for is we try to pay to take away some of the risk that producers might think they're facing. If we tell you as a producer, maybe you're used to putting down 150 pounds of nitrogen, and we go, if you would only put down 100, would be enough. And, some producers are going to go, boy, that seems kind of risky. I'm not going to have as good a corn crop. We'll pay that to kind of offset some of that risk because it is something new. It's a different kind of management style. So I kind of look at, sometimes I tell people, we're paying for that to mitigate that risk a little bit of you making a change on your operation, because you don't know what Mother Nature is going to do. You don't know if you're going to get the rain. You don't know if you're going to get the sunlight you need, or maybe our first frost will come real early. So we try to offset some of that risk.
Not an easy task to have.
No. I'm happy to say, I would say a majority of the time things go exactly the way we planned, but we are dealing with Mother Nature, and sometimes she throws us a curveball too.
Yeah, Mother Nature is her own force.
Yes, she is.
I just want to thank you so much for explaining this. I mean, there's really a lot to cover here, and you're doing a great job.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I can understand how, I'm sure you have some frustrating, situations you find yourself in, just with, say, this practice might be a little better, even though you've been doing this for 40 years, let's try this. I can see how some people might be a little hesitant. So just knowing that there's a program that will actually help you figure out what your soil needs and the best output, really reach out to your NRCS employees. Like, they're amazing to work with. And before we run out of time here, though, Jeff, I wanted to ask you if you could, in simplest terms or as fast as you can, kind of update us on the Inflation Reduction Act or any Farm Bill programs.
You bet. So it's kind of an interesting time right now. Our current farm bill expires here at the end of September, and Congress is currently working on a new one. Crossing our fingers they get something done here in the next month and a half. But in reality, I foresee the farm bill getting extended most likely until they can actually get a new one passed. Here's a really cool thing about the Inflation Reduction Act. I talked about us having a lot of applications, and we have to do the rankings and those kinds of things because of the demand for our programs. Well, with the Inflation Reduction Act, this has brought a major influx of funding for all of our programs. So we are really interested in working with landowners, especially if they haven't worked with us before, because we have a whole large new pot of money. And this is going to be stressful on our staff, don't get me wrong, because we're basically doubling our budgets, is essentially what's happening. So typically with EQIP, we service between 400 and 450 producers, and CSP is probably in the 100 to 125 range. And we're basically probably looking at doubling both of those numbers. So this is the time. If you've been thinking about doing something on your property as far as infrastructure or different kind of management, come see us because our pot of money has greatly increased with the Inflation Reduction Act. We do have to use those climate smart activities that I showed you a little bit ago. The IRA dollars can only be used on those practices, but our staff is ready. And there's a few creative ways that we can still work with producers to implement some of these practices on their property. So definitely come in and see us, because our funding has just grown enormously because of this Inflation Reduction Act. So we're here, we're ready, and we're certainly hopeful that we can help you on your property with any chance we get.
That's great. My last question is, going forward, what is one thing that you would like to see producers kind of gravitate towards as stewardship practices?
Well, I think the biggest thing is we have a few core practices that we call that are best for soil health. And probably the two hardest ones that I think for producers to adopt is no-till or minimum till, and then changing crop rotations. And I'm not faulting anybody. If you look at a lot of our operations across South Dakota, it's a lot of corn bean rotations. A lot of the wheat has started to disappear in South Dakota, and we'd like to see some of those small grains come back. It helps in a lot of ways. It helps store carbon. It helps break up the weed cycle. It helps reduce the amount of chemicals that you have to use and the amount of fertilizer you have to apply, reducing those input costs. All those do a lot of things, not only for the land and the soil, but I think it also does a lot of things for producers' pocketbooks. And before I forget, and I apologize a little bit, specialty producers, I mean, we've really started to try to dive into that realm of things. It is a little bit of a different situation for us. We have an urban ag specialist located in Sioux Falls, and we're really starting to try to work with some of these more smaller farmers, producing more vegetables and doing farmers markets and those kinds of things. So I don't care how small of an operation you got, don't hesitate to come in and talk to us. We're learning on that realm a little bit, but we do still have a lot of things that we can offer those folks as well, including cost share.
Yeah, it's never a bad idea to ask, even if the answer might not be what you want right now. It seems like a lot of things are in motion and that could change in the future. So
exactly.
The best thing that you could do is get your spot in line now, because it seems like with all this funding and all this extra work, are there more employees coming in?
We are trying to staff up, so yes. But just like everybody else, we struggle finding staff as just like everybody else does. And then when we do get them on, we got to get them trained and up to speed and those kinds of things. So it does take a little bit, but we are trying, yes.
Yeah, so it's not a Walmart stop. This is going to be a process, but it's going to be worth your while and worth your time and easier on your pocketbook.
Yes, absolutely.
And better for the soil, better for the environment, which is what we want. That's our goal.
Correct.
Well, I want to thank you again, Jeff, for joining us and sharing, EQIP and climate smart practices, and giving an update on the farm bill. That's just something that I'm kind of like, what is going on,
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to reach out to Jeff, or try to find your nearest NRCS office, his contact information is up there in the description. You can always message our page as well. We're happy to share that. And this segment, again, has been funded by NRCS, and its goal is to promote sustainable agriculture and practices in environmental stewardship. So thank you, Jeff. You've given us a wealth of knowledge, and I just appreciate your hard work over the last 26 years. That's dedication, and it matters. So again, I'm Christine Reiner. I'm the communications coordinator for SD Specialty Producers. You can visit our website at sdspecialtyproducers.org, view our upcoming events, find resources. Also, if you're looking to connect with a farmer, we have many specialty producers who have high quality products that are looking for your support. So thank you again for your time, Jeff. And we'll talk soon, because
thanks everybody.
I really enjoyed this conversation, so thank you.
You bet, anytime.